Okay, so let's get started with this. I have been wanting to try one of these boards for a while now, and I found this one on Amazon. And the tutorial I watched was from Jessica Flynn, and I will go ahead and link that in the description for you. She prepped the board by sanding it, and I was so surprised. So I took my sanding block and I went ahead and started sanding. And as you can see, I got a little carried away in one spot, and I went ahead and kind of, sanded off some of the finish. But so don't sand as hard as I did there, but surprisingly it worked with the board. So we're going to call it a happy accident. And after you're done sanding, you're going to want to take a paper towel and some rubbing alcohol, and you're going to want to clean it really well and get any of the debris from the sanding, any excess oils. It's super important to make sure that your board is completely prepped. And then I took some tape, some painter's tape, and taped the back side of the board completely, leaving a little bit of an overlap because you're going to trim around the outside, and take your time doing that, by the way, because your knife is super sharp. Um, so I trimmed around the outside and pressed down very, very well to make sure that everything was adhered. So that way, when I was pouring resin on the other side, it wouldn't seep underneath. Now I decided to use these specific colors on the board, and if you start at the bottom, it is the Edward Pigment, Peacock, Tanzanite, the Starcourt Glitter, and the Celine Glitter, and all of those can be found on my website. So I took about 4 ounces of resin, part A and part B artist resin from CC DIY, and I went ahead and mixed that. Uh, for about 4 ounces of resin, you're going to want to mix for about 15 minutes. And I separated it into about 7 separate cups, little medicine cups, I'm sorry. Um, I honestly, this is my first board, so I had no rhyme or reason for any way that I did this. I just kind of had an image in my head from other boards I've seen, and I just kind of just went from there. When you're mixing your glitter into your resin, you don't want to mix too much where it's super chunky and you're not going to be able to work with it. But you also don't want to mix too little to where it's super runny. So these glass pieces, I got these from CC DIY. They have a huge variety of glass stones that you can use, and I picked clear because I wanted to be able to see the glitter through it, which it did work, but in a sense it didn't, because later on you'll see when I poured the clear resin over it, it kind of separated, but that was my mistake, and that was a lesson learned. Again, it kind of ended up working out. So I just kind of went with my heart here. You can use larger stones. These ones are pretty small. For my first time, I just wanted something that I would be able to work with a little easier. And once I was happy with that, I just started working in the other colors. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And you really do have the convenience of taking your time with this. I mean, not too much time because, resin only has a, certain amount of time in the pot. So artist resin from CC DIY, you probably have a good half an hour, 45 minutes before it starts getting thick and difficult to handle. So if you have the time, you can take your time on something like this and it'll be so worth it. This Peacock Pigment is on my website and it is such a vibrant blue. I wish I would have used a little bit more of it on this project. I was a little hesitant to do this because my hands aren't always the steadiest and I was afraid that my lines were going to be kind of all over the place, but I actually did not do too bad. Now this purple is called Starcourt. It is one of the mixes that I have on my website, and it is like the most purpliest purple I have, and it is probably the most underappreciated purple on my website. So I loved it, and I knew that I had to use it on this as well. And it's okay if you go over the edges. I actually think that it gives it such a finished look when the epoxy goes around the edge. I mean, you're going to clean it up anyway, so it just works. I'm actually surprised that I did not get any resin into that little hole right there. This is the Edward pigment. It is a very, very sparkly white. I didn't want to fast forward or speed up through this part because I really wanted you guys to see that this does take a great deal of patience, I should say, patience in time to get it to look how you have envisioned it. And I want to just say that there really is no wrong way to do these projects. When you're intimidated by something, honestly, my best advice is just to do it and to go for it, because this was so fun, and I probably will say that I might make more. And I don't say that too often about new projects that I try, because I do just get very intimidated by them. off to the side, I actually had um, a cup with clear resin in it and a cup with some white armor art that I also got from CCDIY. You're going to want the clear resin for two reasons. First, so it will give you a good medium to push the white, if you choose to have like cells and lacing on your project, it'll give you a good medium to push that up into the other colors, and also to put over your stones to kind of make it so the edges are not as rough. And as you can see, it actually took me a couple tries to get the armor art to uh, go from the cup to the board, and that was because it had taken me a little bit of time to get to this point, but eventually it did what I needed it to do. And you're gonna want to take your heat gun, and I like to hold my heat gun at an angle to push the armor art up into the glitter. You don't have to do it that way. That's just how I do it. It's just the angle at which the board was at anyway, so it just worked out. And then I took my torch and went ahead and popped any bubbles that happened to come to the surface, and that also helps produce the cells and the lacing in the white. And you see here, this is where I took the clear resin and put it over my glass pieces. If you're using regular rounded stones, the step probably wouldn't be necessary, but you can still do it just to make sure that everything stays in its place. And you can go ahead and put any last finishing touches you want on your project. When you're finished, you're going to want to make sure that you have it in a warm, safe space, and you're going to want to let it sit for about 12 to 18 hours before you move on to the next step. Okay, so it's been about 18 hours for this piece, and I actually love how it turned out. So I'm going to show you how to take the tape off the back. Now, this is how you don't do it. It's very difficult to get around the pieces that are dried. So if you take your heat gun and just run it over those epoxy beads, it comes right off so easily. So don't try and rip it off. Your heat gun is going to be your best friend during this process. And then I took my knife and cut off any pieces of tape that got stuck into the board, which was more than I wanted, but it was there. And some of the pigment actually ended up staining the back of the board. So I probably really could have sanded it all off, but it would have taken forever. So I just sanded off whatever I could. And then I wiped it down, and I actually ended up grabbing some food grade mineral oil and an old cloth that I just had laying around, and just started rubbing the oil into the board. And because we used alcohol and we've sanded multiple times, you're going to definitely want to take your time to rub this oil back into the board. So it's about 5 minutes, I would say, to make it all nice and pretty and shiny again after all that sanding. And honestly, you guys, that's it. I love how this turned out. I cannot wait to see what you guys make.